All right, folks, now we're going to continue with Cornford's Before and After Socrates, pages 15 through 28. So Greek science, right, is going to take everything, right, everything aloft aloft in the sky and under the earth, is what they're going to phrase it, as their province of study. Anything and everything can be answered. Nothing's too hard, nothing's too difficult. One of the standards I like about philosophy is you can't just shuffle it off a question, oh, that's just too hard. No, this is the place we answer the tough questions. Not a place where you can duck things like that. You shouldn't be ducking hard questions. That's a bad idea. You may learn an awful lot by answering. You may not hear what you want to hear, but in the process you learn quite a lot. So it's going to take everything as its province of study, as we do today as well. Right? We pretty much claim everything we see is something we can take a look at. Right? Now this is what's interesting, right? These guys is you're going to see in these pre-Socratics, here later atomism, and here specifically, right, evolution, is that the big theories, scientific theories of the 19th and 20th centuries were already being discussed by the Greek philosophers. For instance, Anaximander, right, thought that life had evolved, right, from the sea, and thought it came out of the sea creatures because there's simpler life forms in there. Right, but he had a very good argument for this. He didn't just guess this into existence. Just like he said, the first human babies are too weak to survive by themselves. Therefore, they had to. The first human had been a baby infant. We never would have lived. Therefore, the whole species could never get started. Since the species is here, it had to come from something simpler in order to exist over time and get to a more advanced stage. What happened with anything, right, that cannot sustain itself rather quickly after birth, like cattle can move after an hour. It takes humans 5 years or so before they can even feed themselves. So we have to come from something simpler. He said probably from sea creatures, and we evolved from sea creatures. So these guys are really thinking. Right? This is from the armchair. These guys haven't taken a ship around the Galapagos Islands, HMS Beagle, and studying. He's figuring this out from an armchair in Greece. It's the power of conceptual reasoning. If your concepts are accurate, you can go awful far, awful fast. If your concepts are accurate. If they're not, it's a little more difficult. Right? And Cornford's also going to point out one of the vast difficulties that we see for science even today. Right? And this is a thing of when you try to say everything's based on empirical evidence, then what's your claim? What warrant do you have for asserting that something continues to exist after you've stopped observing it? Now, psychology calls this object permanence, and you can see this when you play a game of peekaboo with children. Right, you'll disappear your face from the children, pull it back up. The children are surprised to see you're there. Right, they think you disappeared literally. Over time, we get used to thinking things continue to exist when they're not observed. Things are object permanent, and we don't get surprised by peekaboo anymore. Well, the same problem faces the scientist. You want to claim everything is empirically verifiable, and you do your study on March 7th at 8:38 a.m. p.m. in Toomey Hall, room 250. What's your warrant for thinking that's true the next day, or even 1 minute later if you're not doing the study? Now, we use things like substance, concepts like substance or object permanence to explain why things continue on when they're not being observed. But we have not observed that. So fundamentally, science has to employ a concept that it cannot prove scientifically. Right? And this is dependence on philosophy, as Cornford will show. One of the great things about Cornford is in the middle of talking about pre-Socratics, he drops these wonderful, right, gems of knowledge about other subjects, right? So we're also talking about these Greeks who played this idea of atom. Now these are atum, right? A-T-U-M. For Greeks, the word a is like our word un, right? Tum, T-U-M is cuttable, so atum is the atum or the uncuttable thing. And they reason that if things were sliceable, you could slice them down so far. At some point, you either slice them so far nothing is left, in which case you can have nothing to build with and you would have nothing in physical existence. Thus, there must be some point where you reach where you cannot cut further, right? And that's the smallest thing, that's the uncuttable thing, that's the atum. And they theorized that reality was just these atums, right, moving in a void, right? They tried to explain consciousness, human awareness, as round atoms being rubbed by other atoms. So this kind of does a little bit of work, but not that much, right, in terms of explanation. Even if it was round, it wouldn't have a sensation, it wouldn't have a feeling, right, of something being pinched, of pain, or of pleasure, right? Whether you're spherical or not would not seem to generate feelings. If matter is something that has weight and takes up space, it is not has weight, takes up space, and has feelings. It's a whole other category added into it, which is unaccountable in these atomic theories. So this is one of the reasons why the Greeks move away, and we never really see a return until the 20th century for some odd reason. People stop studying philosophy, just try to do science without philosophy. Well, before we see a return to this idea, you can explain things just in terms of particles and chemicals and stuff like that. It was soundly and roundly rejected in the past, and for good reasons. It simply does not give a full account of our experiences. It is an incomplete philosophy. Right, but nonetheless, we have this materialistic drift in Greek thought, and Socrates is going to react against that. He's going to come out and start talking about the human mind, right? Not just describe it, but also prescriptions about how we might go about ordering it to have a better life. All right, folks, just go back over a quick summary. We have three general things discussed in Cornford's chapter 1. Right, the first is the development of science, right, and philosophy. Right, it's focused on the external world, but it does move on to the internal with Socrates. But we're talking about that. We're talking about getting rid of supernatural, legendary, mythological explanations and going to the publicly verifiable. We're also talking about, right, why the atomic theory, probably physical account of our existence, our experience is inadequate. Right, this creates the background of what was going on before Socrates, what they were doing, some of the mistakes they were making, and why Socrates is necessary to come on and be given to give us a complete philosophy. We have a philosophy of the external world with atomism. We're now going to need a philosophy of the internal world, and together we'll start seeing what makes up a full philosophy these days, and with Plato and from then on.